Hey, welcome to the Trevor Roberts Talkfest. AJ, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. How are you doing?
Great. Doing well. How are you?
Doing good. Well, I'm just going to get us started with a quick introduction. So, for anybody listening, we are I don't know how you would say it. We're distant cousins somehow. Like, I don't know if the
Aren't you my
second
mom's cousin, technically?
that would probably be it. Yeah. So, is that twice removed? I don't really know what all that means, but we're related. I think I'm your mom's cousin. That makes sense. And I have ran into your mom like 3 or 4 times over the last 2 years. And we've had dinner a couple times, and she was telling me about you and about your career and some of the different experiences you had. And I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, like that sounds so interesting. I always knew you were a pilot. And I think for anybody that's not a pilot, that doesn't know a pilot, it's like, it's just such like a fascinating career that people don't really understand. It's like I always think of the curtain, like there's the cockpit door, and you're not allowed in there as a regular passenger, and it's almost like the Wizard of Oz curtain. Like you don't get to see behind the curtain, and it's a mystery. So
You
I
could feel free to come up before or after the flight.
seriously,
Oh yeah,
people
if you
can
want to
do
come
that.
sit up there. Oh yeah.
Oh,
I remember as a kid on Southwest and whatnot because we grew up flying Southwest a lot. Yeah, my mom always wanted to make sure I could go up there and see everything from inside. So the pilots are more than happy to have people come up and look and sit up there.
wow.
I guess it gets kind of weird the older they get. If they're in their 40s, they're like, "Hey, can I have a seat?" But especially for kids, a lot of the time we'll have them come up if they want to, and
Oh,
yeah, sit up
I
there.
I'm gonna try to do that. Like I think we're gonna be flying with our daughters in about 6 weeks. I think, and I might do that. I mean, that's incredible. I didn't know that you could.
If they
Um,
allow you. Some
yeah,
pilots
I mean they
may
might say
be
no,
like, "Hey,
but
we're too busy right now." Who knows? But
right. Um, but I do fly a decent amount for work, and so I'm familiar with it. But it's just a fascinating thing. I have terrible vision, and I don't know if it's a myth, but I always thought, well, I can't be a pilot because I don't know. I don't think I ever spent too much time on it, but I have been fascinated with airplanes and the process of being a pilot and the pilot's lifestyle as long as I can remember. And so I asked your mom, I was like, do you think AJ would have any interest in doing this? And she thought you might. And so we've been talking on and off for a while now. And I am so excited that you're here today. So truly, thank you for taking the time to do it. I have some questions I'm excited to ask you about, but do you want to do like any overview just of who you are, how long you've been flying, who you fly for, or share as much or as little as you want to do, just to do like a quick background?
sure. First thing, I wear contacts or glasses depending on if I have my contacts available, like if I run out
Okay.
or my eyes bothering. By all means, you can wear corrective lenses, and it's illegal though if I fly without them because in my medical that we have to get it says must wear corrective lenses. So by all means, if you don't have good eyesight, I can't speak for the Air Force. I'm pretty sure they're like you have to get uh, LASIK, or I think they're doing something a little bit more advanced than LASIK now. But you have to get your eyes corrected first before you can fly
Okay.
for them. Could be wrong, but as far as I understand it, that's what it is. But yeah, no, for me, I can wear contacts. But yeah, beyond that, um, I I mean, I grew up traveling all the time because, like my parents and whatnot are from Nebraska, so we constantly flew to Omaha and whatnot, and beyond other places, I think. Um, and anytime we were in a plane, I always had a great time, and I would always bring the little models with me or the little toys and play with the planes in the planes and draw pictures of planes. And I think I was pretty much all obsessed with them. So I also loved baseball, still do, still follow the Diamondbacks religiously, um, which they're playing right now, and they're destroying the Rockies, so I'm fine with that.
Heck yes.
Yeah, big big one there. But yeah, so I played baseball pretty much all the way up through my senior year of high school. I had some offers and I had scouts looking at me, and I'm sure you can still find my old baseball stats online still. But my so in eighth grade, I ended up having shoulder surgery on my collarbone. It dislocated off my sternum, and then from there, my shoulder was really good again. And so ninth and 10th grade, I was thrown consistently in the low 90s because I think I came off the physical therapy and strength and conditioning through it pretty decently. And then towards the end of my senior year, my shoulder was just falling apart, and I was just horrific tendonitis everywhere. And I mean, my hand would go numb and stuff like that just walking to class. And I was like, okay, I think it's time to move on from baseball, as hard as it was to make that choice. But it's like, oh, what do I do next? And it's like, well, I guess I could start flying airplanes. And so that's what I did. Senior year of high school was I started learning how to fly. Um, and then, I mean, I can get into details about that, but be careful on who you pick to start flying with. There are a lot of the pilot schools that they call, I think, like pilot farms, essentially, where their
Okay.
whole goal is to get them in and pump out as many pilots as quickly as possible. And there are a lot of mom and pop ones, which I'm sure there's a lot of good mom and pop ones. The one I chose happened to be not good. And I had an instructor who hadn't been instructing, I believe, since the 80s, he said. So all of the new certification processes and things we had to know, he was unfamiliar with, and I was too. I don't have anyone in my family who flies, so I was just as clueless as probably
Any
any other
student.
person. Yeah, walking into it, I didn't have like I know a lot of guys who's like, oh, my dad flies for whoever and all that. So I went to the school, and to which they're out of business now. I heard that they flopped. Um,
Oh,
and sold all their planes off. And I think they went bankrupt. But my instructor was teaching me from the 80s, so I was sent into a couple check rides and had no idea what I was doing. And they asked me some very basic questions, and I had no idea what the answer was. It was like, uh, tell me that this plane's airworthy. You show up to the airport, how do you know that this airplane's airworthy? And there's all these different certification things you got to look at, and inspections have to be done by certain times, and all these little regulation and regulatory things that we're supposed to look through and know and understand. And I was like, well, I show up and the plane's ready and they have the clipboard for me, and that was my answer. And I couldn't tell you any of the rigs, or I just I showed up and flew an airplane, and that didn't go over very well with the instructor, or not the instructor, with the examiner. And so the examiner I had for the first couple of check rides, I believe. It's been 8, 9 years ago, so my memory's a little foggy. But essentially, he's like, "You have no idea what you're doing, do you?" I'm like, I had no idea what he was even talking about. That I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what they call the ACS is. My instructor is teaching me off the 1980 something PTS standards, or however that was. Couldn't tell you what exactly the book, but the PTS is the old way, and then the ACS became the new way, which is a lot more scenario based. So ended up messing me up a little bit because it looks bad on your record to have check ride failures. You can have one or two without getting anyone a question. I ended up having three because he sent me in again for a second one. And then throughout my normal training after that, I had another check ride failure, which was on a power off 180 maneuver, which is the hardest one, and everyone fails it. Essentially, it's the most failed upon item. So that looks pretty normal, but I have two in my private pilot oral. So, and I've been able to explain it, and most people are like, "Oh, that's super understanding." And it's been, it's just more to talk to and speak on, as long as you can give them why and how you overcame it. And, I have a good record beyond that, so it's not that big of a deal. The more the pilots are in need, as long as they can tell, like, oh, he just had a little bit of a little rough patch to start. So, I ended up switching to a big flight school called ATP Flight Schools, and did my flying through a Part 141 program, which was um, where you get a degree associated with um, your flying. So I have a bachelor's of science in aviation, essentially. It's a lot longer term. or title, I mean. So I did that. I was in school for 3 years. I had enough AP credits and honors, whatever, from high school that I pretty much canceled out a year of college. And um, then right when I was about to graduate, COVID happened, and then the entire industry kind of fell apart because no one wanted to travel and everyone was afraid of being in an airplane, which was the
Oh yeah.
perfect time to travel if you were a non-rev or if you already had airline benefits. I know we went to Mexico a couple times during COVID, and it was like the entire plane's open. It's like it was awesome.
And it
So
was
that was,
affordable.
oh yeah, big time. They were just trying to sell seats and get as much revenue as they could. So, um, but I was trying to freelance. I did some instructor stuff, um, as much as I could, and then COVID started dying off, and I think it was 2021 ish. I got another mom and pop flight school job offer, and then they were doing some uh, good student income and whatnot, and they had enough consistent students for me before I could get back to ATP again and start instructing for them once the freeze on pilots was lifted because of COVID and whatnot. So I ended up going back there for I think 6 months, and then got hired on with the airline I'm at now. It's an air carrier technically, so it's a semi-charter company. I'm based out of Scottsdale, and I fly pretty much all around the Southwest. Lots of Vegas and SoCal flights and whatnot.
What does it mean when you say air carrier? Is that passengers or is that like freight?
Air carrier talks about the wording within the regulations. So, air carrier just denotes the fact that we're not an airline, like the big guys per se, but we still sell seats per the regulations we operate under from predetermined points. But we can also charter as well. So you could still go online and buy tickets, just like any other airline, but you have your own seat. We hold up to 30 people, free Wi-Fi, free drinks. I mean, like alcohol wise. Um, you have all this extra leg room, and we fly old uh, um, Embraer 145s that have been, that were retired early from COVID, um, where regionals weren't using them, and we ended up buying a lot of them. And then we converted them into more private jet-looking airlines or airplanes. So,
Okay. That's super cool. So is it a private? It's not private. It's like a public. Anybody can get it,
yes, yeah,
or
you can still buy tickets. Um,
but it has like a private feel almost.
yeah, so um,
Okay.
we do get a lot of big name celebrities, and I don't think I'm necessarily allowed to disclose who we fly, but I have a whole list of celebrities that I've flown, and a lot of
Wow.
big ones you'll see on like big movies and stuff, and it's like, oh, who's on my flight? And so one of the High School Musical stars was on mine, and
Okay.
childhood crush type thing, and so it's kind of cool to be able to see all these people and
Yeah.
get to we slightly interact with them. The flight attendant obviously does more than what we do since we lock ourselves behind the door. But it's still cool to see all these people, and so I got 30 some, I think, celebrities or big names that I've flown. Some a lot of athletes too.
Yeah.
So
I think that's so cool. Um, it would be. I'm sure you have some really interesting stories that you've done, and do you have any interesting stories like as far as passengers like having that where they provide feedback on how the flight's going or anything like that?
I feedback wise, we don't really hear a lot of that. That's more of like upper management level type things. I mean,
Okay.
unless if it's really serious,
Oh, I mean, like almost
or
like as they're walking off the plane, they
oh yeah,
say,
we'll hear the two depending if you have a good landing or bad landing. And I like to think I have good landings more than I do bad. But um, if you have a harder landing and whatnot, a lot of guys will come on and walk by the cockpit and say, "Who's the Navy pilot?" Because Navy pilots have to land on carriers on the middle of the
Okay.
oceans, and you don't have room to be able to smooth out your landing. You got to smash it right on that end of where it is to be able to get the cord caught on your little hook or whatever. So that's
Yeah.
usually like, hey, your landing was really bad or
Okay.
whatnot. But
I'm
then
gonna.
you get a lot of people, like especially the older crowd. They love when they have good landings and like, oh, that was so great. And so we get a lot of that. So that's always nice. It's really rewarding because the landings, obviously most pilots' favorite part to try and show off.
Yeah. No. I mean, I can tell you that I haven't flown anywhere near as many times as you, but maybe twice a month, and I always pay attention to the landing. I don't even really look out the window at this point anymore, and I love sitting in the aisle. But when we're about to land, I always look up and see, like, brace myself a little bit. Um,
Well, I used to always want to look out the window and sitting in a whatever type of plane flying anywhere. I always want to see outside.
yeah,
And even still to this day, my view is looking outside from the front. But when I go into a passenger plane, a lot of pilots end up like not caring anymore. I was like, whatever. I do this for a living, so I'll see outside eventually. There's still a part of me that's like, I want to look outside, even if I'm sitting on the inside aisle. Um,
I, I love to hear that. You
yeah.
know, it's
So
just
there's
like
so
you have a passion for that. You
yeah,
know,
exactly. So
has your view of the world changed at all since becoming a pilot?
view of the world changed.
I guess what I mean by that is like, you can basically like you travel all over. You've been to so many cities, I'm sure. You can get to places that, for somebody that doesn't travel, it's a treat. Once a year, they fly to some destination and they do a vacation and go back home. Everything else is driving, and you're pretty much wherever you need to go. And you've probably seen a lot of cities and and had a lot of really unique experiences.
Yeah, definitely a lot of interesting experiences. A lot of like we were chartering around our one of the sports teams around here, and we took them over to Boston, and it's like I've never been to Boston before, and we get to Boston and we have to turn around and leave. We drop them off, and that's it. So not as many cool experiences as being at one of the legacy carriers, which legacy just means like the Uniteds, the Deltas, the Americans, and flying some big plane from wherever to overseas to like London or Sydney, and you get so many hours of a layover, and people get to enjoy new places. We do too, but a lot of what we do are uh, returning at home at the end of our trips. So I think we get a lot more quality of life than what a lot of other guys do because we may work 4 to 7 days in a row, but we're home every night. So it's a big advantage, and some people uh, definitely prefer that, or a lot more, I should say. Being able to sleep in your own bed versus a hotel. So we get more of that experience of where I'm at. But a lot more places I've seen because of it. So, um, they sent me out to Florida a couple times to fly to there and being at a Boca Raton or Raton or however you say it. But
Yeah.
seeing new places like that. But you always end back up in Boca because you take them out to New York or New Jersey, and then but you turn around immediately after you drop them off, pick up your new passengers, and bring them back. So
Okay, so you're always going out, and like you said, you're like a lot of what I hear about pilots is they are on the road. Like there's a certain lifestyle that comes with it, and you're anybody that you're. Well, I guess I always pictured you staying in hotels a lot, but it sounds like you are getting to fly there and fly home and sleep at home most almost every night.
yeah, we definitely have a nice luxury with that ability. Which I got a nice Tempur-Pedic mattress. I like coming home at night.
Yeah,
I
I mean
like
that's
going to the gym most days and being
yeah,
gone on the road, especially once you get in after because we work 8 to 10 hours a day, just like anyone else. even with the generalized idea, it's like, well, you just push autopilot. I mean, yeah, we do, but there's a lot more that's going on beyond just pushing the autopilot. We turn knobs too beyond push buttons. That's more of a joke, but you're staring at screens for a long time. You're constantly thinking and going over all these different, routes and planning, and there's a lot involved, and it's not as easy cakewalk, walk in the park type mentality that I know a lot of people feel like we have. Uh, it makes the
Well,
job easy that you love it, and so that's like, this is not a job if you're not willing to work for it. But uh, a lot of the time, coming back home is really nice versus going out and staying somewhere. Now, the occasional overnight, it's fine. I like going out
mhm.
to, I end up staying in Vegas a lot. Yeah, we have a big base in Vegas, and so when we, need to help out Vegas and they're flying, and our system makes out you are scheduled to be you staying in Vegas one night, every week or so, if that. It's not that bad, and you can bid when the schedules come out for little to no overnights or a lot of overnights. So it's just based on your preference of what you want.
It's super interesting when you talk about being in the cockpit and the autopilot versus like looking at the screens. I'm sure you're talking to someone at the tower.
Constantly.
Um, can you walk through like or describe maybe just like from takeoff in flight to landing? What is that like? Like, what are you touching? How much energy does it require? Do you get a moment of downtime? How does that work?
So flying starts from well before we even get to the airport, and being physically ready, mentally ready. Even if you got a head cold, that can deteriorate the amount of ability and cognitive ability for that, um, amongst some other physiological stuff like getting your ears clogged and all that, and annoyances with your sinuses if you're using my sickness reference. So obviously, starting from waking up feeling good, if you especially got into a big fight with your parents, I mean, that can deter you from flying, and there are all these different factors that you have to start with, making sure we're all pretty much aligned. And I mean, we're all human, so it's all going to happen. But figuring out, okay, am I eating healthy? Am I staying in shape? Am I doing all these things to help make sure that I can go do my job? So then you start there, and then you go into your pre-flight planning, and a lot of what we have, especially at this level, is we have the dispatchers. We don't call them dispatchers per se because our regulations are a little bit different for their certification, but essentially they're dispatchers, which all big airlines have them. They make your flight plans and calculate your fuel loads, but you have to go through everything and verify that all these numbers are correct and go through everything. And when you're in the private pilot, stage of your life, going through all your flight training, and you're learning about how to do this. So you're doing it yourself versus someone else doing it for you. Um, so then you go through that, you learn all those numbers, you make sure you identify all these different risks and hazards. You look at the weather, you look at the route, and you go through all these different things. It's not just like we show up 5 minutes prior to boarding and we're ready to go, and then people show up. Yeah, I wish it was that easy. Our check-in times are an hour prior, so we show up an hour before our flight is supposed to shut its door, and that's usually enough time. And we do so many of the same routes, since we're not as wide of a network as the bigger airlines, that a lot of the time we're very used to seeing the same routes come through. Especially if we go to Vegas from Scottsdale a lot, I can tell you every single fix on that route, which can lead to other negative things from like getting too familiarized with something, and then that will lessen your situational awareness. So there's all these different things that you have to mentally be ready for, and think of it as your first flight every single time. Always being focused. So next big thing is, I mean, from our perspective of how everything's done, you coordinate with your dispatchers and the people inside, make sure everything's ready to go. Everyone's boarded on time. You try and shut the door early. But I mean, we got to be there, turn on the plane, set everything up, do the walk around, make sure everything looks good exteriorly and then interiorly. And then if, there's maintenance issues, dealing with maintenance to come out and help fix something if it's even fixable. If you've got to
Yeah.
switch airplanes, you got to switch airplanes. I mean, it's a lot of crap like that sometimes can make your days longer. But the biggest thing too, as I'm thinking forward, when you're looking through your flight plan, we do not fly straight lines. The Earth is
Okay.
not flat. So sadly, when you look at a map, you'll see all these curved lines, and that's just simulating the curvature of the Earth. A lot of the times, too, most of the times, the flight plan that's made will never be a straight line. If you're flying small airport to small airport and there's no one in between, then you'll probably get a nice direct from air traffic control and that sort of a thing. But um, coming from Vegas back to Scottsdale, I mean, we go down and then over and then down again, then back in. And it's a lot of moving parts, and it's just how the airspace is all integrated together. So, people always ask, it's like, well, why don't we ever just go direct there? Why do we fly around? That's how the flight plane is, and that's how they keep us separated from other airplanes. So we never go direct. We have all these little GPS fixes, and we're most of the time, flying GPS-based navigation. I can't ever say all the time because there are some times where you might need ground-based navigation. So I'm very careful not to say every time, but
Okay.
Most of the time, yeah. So you have a flight plan, and for these shorter routes, you go from what they call a departure procedure to an arrival. And so if you're climbing out on a departure, most of the times it transitions off the departure to an arrival. So all your fixes were preloaded when you selected that departure or that arrival. So there's not like this big flight plan. It's just like, oh, you're going to depart on this departure, which transitions off the departure on this fix, and then you're going to go from that fix to that fix, which is your transition on the arrival, and that takes you in. And all those are doing is giving you altitudes and waypoints to, help climb or descend you based on air traffic control's need, and it helps separate airplanes on top of reduce the amount of work that the pilot and controller have to do. So it's not just like, go here now, go to this altitude. It's not, I mean, when we fly into Vegas, because Vegas is my easiest, explanation, I guess now, it's ATC will say descend via we get the Rockstar 3 arrival into Vegas all the time. So we have to hit every fix, whether it's a fix just means GPS point.
Yeah,
So,
I was curious about that. Okay.
Yeah, fix is just referring to the GPS waypoint that we're flying to. So not all of them, but there's a lot of them on these departures and arrivals that'll have an airspeed associated with that, like be at 250 knots at 14,000 feet by Petty, which is one of them, which
Okay.
Petty's a box altitude of 14,000 to 19,000, or what we say flight level 190. And you got to be somewhere within that range at 250 knots by the time you hit that point. So that's going to keep you, descending all the way down from whatever cruising altitude you were at. So all these points and whatnot help you get to, the lower terminal area to get into the airport.
Okay.
So it's a lot more complex than people realize. It's not just like there's a runway and then we land.
Is
it's
it
very
ever
systematic.
scary? Is it like when you're like, I know you're not, this isn't your first rodeo, but when you're coming in for a landing every single time, are you a little bit like, I got to hit this or else the whole plane's wrecking? Or is it like muscle memory at this point?
A lot of it's muscle memory.
Okay.
I'm never scared about crashing. No one that I know of is. Crashing is not a normal thing. I mean, on average, I think there's somewhere around 3 million flights that happen every day. And if you were to guess the average amount of number of airplanes that crash on those 3 million passenger flights a day, what do you think that number would be? On average.
On average, 3 million flights a day. How many crash?
On average.
I
These
would
are
say,
just rough numbers.
I would say less than one. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it'd be
don't know.
zero.
Seriously?
Yeah.
And that sounds right because you always hear that it's safer to fly than to drive. And if there ever is like an airplane crash, it's like it makes national news or something.
Exactly. There was one that just crashed in Brazil a couple days ago, and now everyone's like blowing up about it. Like, holy crap! Is it? It's the same thing. It's like, oh, dangerous flight and blah blah blah, and a lot of that's mitigated by all the safety precautions you go, but it can happen, and people shouldn't go in there with the mindset it'll never happen to me, because it could, but it most likely will not. I mean, the most dangerous part, and I know every sort of person in aviation has heard this, the most dangerous part about flying is the drive to the airport.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's the same reason why you never hear about accidents on the freeway that kill people unless if it shuts down the freeway. It's like, oh, there's a fatal accident, take a different route. It's mind numbing because it's just like, oh, we experience this every day. It's nothing new. Someone died in a car. And like the news doesn't, like, how sad is this? It's a very different mentality than when a plane crashes.
Have you ever had a stressful situation occur, like turbulence, or a passenger like is doing something crazy that they shouldn't be doing, and it's like the flight attendants have to deal with it? Or have you ever had anything come up like that?
Stress wise, I think the biggest thing stress wise that I've encountered is just all these factors are happening all at the same time. Whether it's you're late, there's bad weather, things like that, and they all pile up on you at once. And so it's just mitigating the risk of being stressed out. Okay, what's my better alternative? How can what's going to be the better route we can take? I mean, there have been plenty of times where, there's bad weather between SoCal and Phoenix area, and the filed flight plan's taking you right through that. And you got 30 people on board and whatever. And it's like, all right, well, let's call dispatch and ask for a new route that'll, take us away from the weather and around it. Hey, do we need more fuel than that? So things like that. So I wouldn't say necessarily I'm ever stressed out because everything's usually just part of the job. I've had autopilot failures or, normal things that happen to us that aren't ever like, oh, well, I shouldn't say that's normal because it's not, but there are all these things that could happen that it's just like, okay, what's our corrective action for this?
Okay. Has
So,
there ever been a flight path that you were like, this isn't a good idea? Like, I need a different flight path because this is a storm and I don't want to drive through that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not very common, but it can happen. Weather moves, constantly changing, especially, going into Denver at this point of the year. Weather builds towards the afternoon and these massive thunderstorms, and it's happening around, the Phoenix area too, where it's just like north of Phoenix all the time. By the afternoon, all these massive weather systems move in, and you just got to figure out a new route. And sometimes half of it happens and gets worse while you're already flying. So it's just talking to ATC, air traffic control, and having them help you figure out either a new flight plan or whatnot. But it's such a detailed system now that most of the time the pilots and planes ahead of you going to that same place have already started working around the system, so the controllers already know which way you should be going based on previous routes. So there's a lot of help from them too, and most of those guys are pretty great to help you out. But beyond that, it was just normal things you just got to deal with. You just can't let the stress get to you.
So, no, I imagine not. Like everyone, when you're the pilot, I'm sure you're thinking like everyone's counting on me. I have to run. I mean, you have a co-pilot, I'm sure. I think, but
yeah, we call them first officers. So co-pilot's a very generalized term. So
okay.
I'm a captain. So captains will sit in the left seat. First officers in the right seat.
Okay.
And co-pilots, it's kind of like one of those things where it's just a term that somehow, like calling a tissue a Kleenex, where it's just like, it's just a branded name per se, but it's not the actual name of it. So,
do you have any insights or thoughts on the future of aviation? Is there electric? Like, I don't know if it's a thing, but is there a possibility of moving towards electric engines or even no pilots? Is that like in the realm of possibility?
Oh, sure. I think it is in the realm of possibility, and I think they're already working on those types of things. I don't know much on it. Single pilot to no pilot operations is a scary thing
Yeah, it
because
sounds. I don't want that if I'm
no,
a passenger.
no one wants that. The only people who do are these companies who are trying to make these really cool advanced things. As far as I know, most pilots and companies don't stand for that. Now, electric wise, I don't know much about. Um, you know, with like your car, you moved up from a 1980 whatever car to 2000 was a huge difference, and then from 2000 2010, all of a sudden all these computers start getting added in, and then 2010 to 2000 whatever we are now. I mean, it's just computer after computer after computer, and all these different systems and batteries and things like that, and it makes it way heavier. I mean, fuel compared to electrical systems, not electrical systems, like batteries, and I guess electric systems is not a bad word. Fuel's a lot lighter,
Okay.
and so the amount of weight that an electric plane has to endure is so much more, from my understanding of what I'm reading through and whatnot, than what a normal plane like what it is right now is. So either that means if you want to hold a similar amount of people, you can't go as far because it's going to be too heavy, or you hold less people and you can go further. As far as I know, there's nothing else out there beyond those two concepts of what's being developed.
Okay, that makes sense.
So electric planes, I'm sure, in the distant future. I think single pilot planes are too, but I don't think they'll ever get certified to be able to have passenger revenue flights. Now there are planes out there that are single pilot certified. I think like there's an Embraer Phenom 100. I think is one of the ones that comes to mind, where you only need one pilot. It's a jet. It's a very small jet, but the systems are so uh, simplistic compared to a major jet where you need multiple people that the FAA will allow one pilot in there versus two. So there are things like that, but there won't ever be a giant commercial airliner in my mind that will ever go below two.
Okay. Um, when I think about the cockpit in movies, sometimes you'll see like you can't get into that door. Is it locked in the middle of a flight and you have an access? You can let a flight attendant or somebody else open the door, or is that not? Is that just a thing in the movies?
Oh no, we lock it. Yeah, after
It
nine
is.
11. I mean,
Okay.
now mind you, I was young during the 9/11 stuff, but from that time, those doors are locked. Now, for us, it's part of our checklist items because we have to. I mean, we don't just turn on the airplane, take it off, and we fly. I mean, we have all these checklists and things. So, like every part of the flight has a checklist essentially. So we had to go through that. So before starting engines, we have a before start checklist, and so we got to run through all these different things. And the last one on that list is cockpit doors secured.
Okay.
So usually the flight attendant does all of her or his um, safety demos and briefings, and then once everything is good and everyone's secured in the cabin and the cabin's secured, then she'll come up say we're good to go, and then we'll lock the door, and then at that point that's when we can start turning on the engines.
Okay. And
So
that
yeah, we
stays
if we
locked.
yeah the entire time.
Okay.
The only time it's not locked is if someone needs to use the bathroom. Essentially, that's the only time I can think of. Um, so when that happens, the flight attendant walks through, makes sure everyone's seatbelts on, do the seatbelt sign on, anyways. And usually when that happens, and then we'll call her. She'll get everything ready to go, and then she'll call back and say the cabin's ready. So then at that point there will be you get that pilot who's staying in the cockpit, the controls and radios. So he's now monitoring that, and then that pilot and the flight attendant who's switching, she'll come up, be in the cockpit, and then that pilot will go to the bathroom. But as soon as they've switched spots and the flight attendant's up there, they'll relock the door. So anytime there's no movement between that door's going to be locked. But beyond that, that would be the only time I can think of not on the ground where that door would be unlocked. So
Okay.
that's definitely not a movie thing.
No, that's pretty cool. Like, I don't want somebody going into the cockpit, you know?
I don't either.
Um,
It makes our jobs a little bit more complex.
I'm sure it's kind of relieving. Like, you're like, okay, cockpit's locked. Like, I'm makes me a little more comfortable in my setup here.
I I feel like I'm so used to it at this point that it doesn't really change my mentality because I know it has to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if I'm flying it and the door was open, I feel like I probably would be a little bit more insecure about what's going on.
Do you typically fly with the same first officer all the time?
No, I mean it's just based on pairings and schedules. So how our scheduling works is we get a minimum of 14 days given to us, and depending on if the flying is heavy that month or slowing down, if we're out of season of traveling or in the heavy travel seasons, we could get more than 14 depending on, how we bid and whatnot. But we call it bidding. So they send us out a schedule, um, picking type system. And so we put how many days we want to work, um, which is always a minimum of 14. So if you want to work more than 14, you can select however many more days. But whether or not they'll give it to you is based on what the airline can, airline air carrier. Um, Airlines are similar. Each system's a little bit different depending on where you're at. So then we tell them which days we went off and which routes we'd like to fly, more or less based on what time of the day we want to fly, and do we want overnights? Do we want to fly out of a different base that month if it's needed? So it's then compiled in with all that data based on what other people put in. And so, my last month of flying, I flew with the same guy because we essentially asked for the same days off and we asked for the same types of trips. So I actually was flying with him, I think 12 out of the 14 days I was originally scheduled, before picking and trading days and to try and fit the schedule more of what, because, your schedule changes. Oh, hey, now I want to go to this concert. So, oh, I'm flying that day though. All right, let me see if this guy wants to trade with me. So, I mean, things are constantly moving.
Is
But
first officer like a stepping stone, or is that like a lot of people just go with first officer forever?
depends on the airline. There are a lot of guys who get really senior, which seniority is based, or senior. Wow, I cannot speak. Seniority is everything at an airline.
Okay.
So the more seniority you hold, the better your schedule is going to be, and the more you get of what you want. So, like if you are a brand new first officer or captain, and you want the exact schedule you're going to get, you're not going to get it. Because there's so many more people above you who've been there so much longer, so they have more seniority, so they get more of what they want versus you do. So if you're at the bottom of the list, you don't get really what you want a lot of the time. Now you could be
I'm not,
lucky and get what you want,
yeah.
but beyond that, it's not like your normal retail job or whatever, where these are the days I'm open and these are the days that I'm not. And these are the times I want to work. Okay, yeah, here you go. Definitely not like that until you're really senior, and then it's like there are guys and how they bid and whatnot at the big airlines, and they don't have to work very much throughout the month, and then most of their time spent with their family or playing golf, and they're still making you know $500,000 a year. Like, okay,
It does sound like it rewards somebody with seniority, which is great. I mean,
yeah,
we all want to get that. But it definitely sounds like in the beginning, there's probably work life balance because you're not working. I mean, if you're working 14 or 15 days a month, you're getting some balance. But it also sounds like this is like takes precedent over the rest of your life because you kind of have to schedule your life around what they give you as far as your schedule. Is that accurate?
yeah, and we still get PTO and
Okay.
normal types of vacation, that any other job would give you. It's like, oh, here's your 2 weeks, and then as you work more, you obviously get more. So, I mean, there are guys who could probably go a month to 2 months off, depending on how senior they are, and they can bid it off, put vacation time in, and just play around with their schedule, where they can get all this time off in a row, depending on like availability and whatnot. So, it depends on how much you want to go. But when it comes to, I think what you originally asked between first officer and being a stepping stone, there are guys who have all the seniority, and so they get whatever schedule they want. They've been with the airline forever. If they move over to captain, then their seniority drops because now it's different on the captain side. So they may not get the schedule
Oh,
they want. So even though in their overall seniority they're much higher, but based on where base they're at, or if they move over to captain, I mean it changes how
do they
they
get
can
paid
get.
more at captain?
Yeah. The captain rates are insane compared
Oh,
to first. I mean, first officers still make great money. I mean, there are senior first officers that I've heard, that make 300 grand,
okay.
and I mean, captains you can obviously almost double that.
Well, I mean, I
So
have no idea. I don't know what pilots make or anything like that. So
there's
I
a great website called airlinepilotcentral.com, and you can see pay rates in there. I don't know how accurate those usually are, and when new contracts for pay come out, then that can change. And they don't have all of the contract agreements listed, or you don't necessarily see all the ins and outs of how you can earn more money than just your basic rate, but you can see basic rates like that. So it's kind of interesting because I can't tell you numbers, but I know they're where like the Uniteds and the Americans, you can make 400 something dollars an hour as a top senior captain, but you're
wow.
only paid based on your essentially flight hours. So it's not like you're working 40 hours a week, because you're only limited to 1,000 hours a year at the major airlines.
You
So
cannot fly more than that.
no, but that does not mean that you can't play around with your schedule and get premium paid trips that are paid out at 200%, or having trips that are taken away from you because they need training captains to fly with new first officers, or captains who are going through retraining or whatever. It doesn't matter. So they can take that away from you, but you're still getting paid what you were scheduled, and then you get another trip on top of that. So then you get paid on top of your first pay.
Wow.
So um, yeah, it's pretty interesting how you can play with it. We don't have as many options because we're just not that big, but we still get premium paid trips, and obviously picking up 200% of your normal rate is way better than your standard rate. But those are always nice little treats at the end of the month, to see in your paycheck if you get them.
When you say premium paid trip, is that just referring to you're getting double your hourly rate, or is there like a specific destination that makes it premium paid that's like
No,
different
it's
than
usually
normal?
based on availability of like, we need someone for, and trip denotes the flights and days you'll be gone. So there can be a 1 day trip which involves 2, maybe 3 legs. Who knows? It just depends where you go. Like you go to Vegas and back, and then you're done for the day. That's your trip for the day. But then if you have like a 3 day trip, which I know Southwest has 3 day trips as their most common types of trips, um, you go from wherever, and then you overnight in a different city the first night. You overnight in another city the next night. Then you're home on the third day. So then they're 3 day trips. And so if they needed someone for that trip and they were going to pay you whatever, 150%, 200%, because there's, I think, depending on the airline and the way they word their contract, 200% premium can be different. Premium can be 150% and then 200% or double pay. So it's all based on what they need. If they need to schedule more people and they can't get anyone just to pick it up at their normal rate, then that's when you kind of see things like that. Or, maybe there's like a red eye flight that pays more because, you're having to fly overnight, things like that.
Right. Okay. Um, if you build up seniority with your company as a pilot, as a captain, but then you switch to Southwest, you're kind of starting over again.
Yeah, you start from the bottom.
So
So
eventually, you kind of want to get somewhere and be like, "This is my home forever."
pretty much, yeah, the faster you get to, where you want to be. And, each airline's different. And each one has different things that should factor into where you choose to go. And, we don't pay as much as the big airlines. I mean, we still make great money. It's not anything against that. But where we differ than most of the big airlines is I'm home every night.
Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah. So it makes it a lot nicer when, you have a birthday dinner or someone's wedding coming up. And, it's easy to trade because most of our days are just their own days. So even if you have a block of 7 days in a row you're working, if there's something that happens within those 7 days and you need to trade off a day, there's a good chance you can trade it off, and you don't have to get rid of more than just one day per se. So, um, yeah, yeah.
Do you get I'm sure I've heard, like, I know a flight attendant and she was telling me that she gets all these perks like standby and she can basically just go anywhere anytime. Do you take advantage of that kind of stuff a lot? Like, are you on your days off like, "Ah, I'm going to go check this out," or
The irony with me is that I don't like to travel,
Oh, that's
and not
super.
not that maybe I should rephrase that. It's not that I don't like to travel as much as, to me, traveling is work.
Yeah,
So the
that
last thing
makes
I want to
sense.
do on my days off from working is leave again. Now, obviously, going on vacation is different and whatnot, but I know a lot of people who love to travel, and the whole reason why they became a flight attendant is because they wanted those benefits to constantly go new places and be able to just, non-rev or standby. So non-rev meaning non-revenue passenger. Um, find empty seats on wherever, and it's like, well, I've never gone to Miami. Oh, let's jump on this flight. It's got so many open seats, and they get on there and they go from wherever to Miami, and then they spend a couple of days in Miami and get to see somewhere new. So, like, those things aren't out of the question. And yeah, I've used them, but it's not like something I do every month.
For
Yeah,
sure.
I went to San Diego last month, and went there for a couple of days, just get rid of the hot weather in Phoenix and find a nice beach to relax on. Just like, hey, this is nice. But beyond that, I mean, it still costs money to find a place to stay and
Yeah,
buy
get a
food on the
hotel.
road. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's it's not stuff that I want to do. But yes, it's widely available, but it's all based on space available. So if there's a full flight, you're not going to get on. So um, it's not something I do a lot, but it's an advantage that we have. And the travel part right now is so bad compared to where it was a couple of years ago because everyone's traveling, everyone's flying. It's so hard to find open flights a lot of the time in the times that you want. Like, you're not going to make it to Vegas on a Thursday or Friday at probably, the morning or early afternoon because everyone's going to Vegas for the weekend.
Yep.
Those flights fill up. The night before it could be, like, oh, there's 15 seats available. The next day it's all sold. I mean, the day of, they're selling tickets that fast. So things like that. Now, the flight attendants and pilots, when they non-rev compared to like their family, we can use jump seats. So like a jump seat would be like a third or fourth seat in the cockpit or in the cabin, and since we're certified under the FAA's whatever, and we participate in these safety programs, we can go up there and sit in the cockpit, which, or not, flight attendants can't, but the pilots could for that, from my experience. It's not comfortable though. Like, you're not like spread out in like the cockpit. I mean, you have an upright seat against the wall. I know the Airbus has a lot more room than the Boeing's do, a lot of the time, but uh, it's not like, oh, I'm going to spread my legs out. Like, there's a middle console pressing right into your shins,
Yeah.
and you got to do as much as you can to try and keep readjusting so that way you don't cramp up. And so, you can do it. It's possible, but if it's a longer flight, it's not something that's ideal. So you'd rather have open space in the back to have a normal seat.
Okay, so I find it interesting too with the whole experience of getting through, going to the airport, getting through security, and all of that. So I have TSA. I didn't get clear yet because Omaha didn't have that. I'm thinking
The
about getting it
pre-check.
now that, like, have you heard of Clear?
Oh yeah, yeah,
So like TSA pre-check, I can go to the faster line, but Clear is like another level where you do the eye scan and you go to the front of TSA pre-check. And Seattle has it, so I was
yeah.
thinking about doing it. But TSA pre-check is like a one-time fee, and you get 5 years, whereas Clear is a annual fee. So it's a little bit more of a bigger deal. But I'm curious, like as a pilot, Do you get a totally different experience going through the airport? Do you like what is it like for you? Do you go through security or do you have to walk amongst all the people with your bags? How does this work?
There's a lot of rules that we have. If we participate in certain programs, we can get certain privileges. It's changing a bit to be a little bit more restrictive than what it is. So they're ramping up what we call random checks. We call them randoms, but we have this thing called known crew member or KCM, and so we walk up. Depending if you're in uniform or not in uniform, maybe you need two forms of ID versus one. So I like traveling in my uniform a little bit more, and we wear more relaxed fits versus like a button down with a tie. So we have polos, and so I don't mind it. And I used to work at Lululemon for 5 years, so all my pants are really comfy. So
Yeah.
it's not a big deal to me to wear my uniform because it's like a golf polo with really nice pants, so that don't shrink up.
Lululemon is the best, so I'm right there. I totally get
I
that.
miss my discount, man. I really do, but I bought way too much over the 5 years, so I don't need any more clothes for a long time. But so we walk up to that guy, and he's usually on the side of everyone, depending on which airport you're at. Some of them are further away, and other ones are right next to the pre-check line. It depends how they set it up. But you walk up, you scan your badge, you show them your another badge, you show them your passport or ID, and then he's like, "All right, welcome in," and then you just walk around the entire line, and you're in the terminal. Now,
No
sometimes
putting your bag through the scanner thing.
nothing. Now, they do randoms, and they watch you like a hawk. I mean, there are cameras everywhere, and we've seen all these videos of like there were a lot of instances of I think flight attendants. Now, this I don't know timeline of how long ago this was. I know it was within the last few years, where like flight attendants were needing to make extra money, so they had KCM, and so they went down to like their trips down to like Colombia, and they were bringing back like drugs,
Oh my
and then
gosh.
they tried to go through the pre-check line or not pre-check the KCM line, and then they got random, so then they have to go to the pre-check line, and then they caught drugs, or then they see them on camera. It's like, oh, I got random. So instead of walking into the line, then they like walk into their bathroom, change clothes, and like discard whatever they had. And I think we've seen videos like that. And then it's like, okay, but I mean, they're constantly watching you, and it's not just like, oh, we get to skip the line. I mean, like, yeah, we kind of do, but it's because we go through so many security and background checks prior to being able
Yeah.
to get that privilege. So then if you get randomed, if you're in uniform, you can go to the pre-check line and skip the line. You can walk right past everyone. So I was jump seating or commuting out to Nebraska. I didn't have to pay any money for my ticket. I just flew on open space available last week, and my dad was standing in the long pre-check line because it was a busy Saturday morning, and I just was in my uniform. I'm like, let me just skip the line or whatever, because I got random. So I went through. I still go through the pre-check line. You still do everything else everyone else does, whether they need you to take off your shoes or whatever. You still get scanned. It's not a big deal. So, but I mean, if you don't have pre-check and you're not in uniform and you get rammed, you got to go through the normal line, I believe.
Really?
And then you
Okay.
can't use that now if you're going through to international destinations because of all the issues. So, I mean, it's getting more restrictive, and I've heard rumors that they're going to take it all away at some point. I don't know if that's true.
To me, it does seem like I have no problem with pilots getting some perks. I mean, we all should get perks for our career.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I get something with my career. Um, I don't know what it is, but I don't know. I do think that having a perk here and there is nice. Um, what about? I'm just like totally. This is just a curiosity, but like with airplane mode on my phone, is that real? Like, is that a big deal? Are you able? Is that like a super big secret or something? I like don't know how important that is. You know?
Um, I. It's not like it's a secret. It does affect certain things within the plane, especially it can interfere a lot of the times with what we call a radio altimeter, and that's can be interfered with by 5G signal cells or whatever, and things like that. So yes, when they tell you to put it in airplane mode, put it in airplane mode. Listen, you must follow the regulations because you can get fined or whatever.
You can
Beyond
get
that, I'm
fined for not
I'm
doing
pretty
it.
sure. I think if you break any sort of federal regulation, you can probably get fined. I don't know why you wouldn't. I couldn't tell you the exact ins and outs of what they'll do. Just listen to the directions that they give you in the airplane. Whether or not it actually does anything is a different conversation that I'm not willing to answer. So whenever the flight attendant tells you to do something, you better do it because they're the ones in charge of you while you're in there.
Okay. Um, this is just the craziest thing to me. This airplane mode, but I do it, and I always wear my seatbelt. I don't mind wearing the seatbelt. Like, I actually feel like with turbulence, sometimes you kind of pop up and down really quickly, and you'd want to have your seatbelt on in that scenario.
It's the craziest thing to me that people are like, well, I'm just not going to wear my seatbelt anyways because whatever. And like, yeah, I'm sure it's not like the most comfortable thing in the world. It's not like you have to death strap yourself in there and make it as tight as possible. But like, have it secure around your waist. I don't understand what the issue is doing that. And so many
No,
people just don't like it. And then there was a Hawaiian Airlines flight from Phoenix, out of all places, over to Hawaii, and they hit random severe turbulence. And there were so many people injured who weren't wearing their seatbelts. And it's just like, well, even
well,
if the
duh.
seatbelt signs off, right? They always say we want you to stay in your seat with your seatbelt fastened, even if it's off, but you're not moving.
Yeah, no. I I bartended and have been in the service industry my whole career on the side, and so just doing the bare minimum things that they ask you to do and just trying to make everybody's job easier is, like, I think, a common courtesy. Like, I put my bags up top unless it's a little thing, and then I put it under the seat. I always put on my seatbelt. I like to sit in the aisle because if I have to get up, I don't want to have to bother anybody. So I just sit there. Um, I don't know. Flying for me is easy, and I don't get why people stress about it. But the airplane mode, I'm just like, I don't, I don't have a problem doing it, but I think that there's like a conspiracy around it or something.
It's not that there's a conspiracy. It's just that in the unlikely event that it can really interfere with the plane. I mean, there's a couple times, and I can't tell you whether or not it was because of interference with the airplane. I mean, but I've seen why it's applicable. It's whether or not that 90% of the time, random numbers, it doesn't happen. I mean, there have been times where it's like the plane has this, like I said, radio altimeter, which is sensing how far you are from above the ground.
Okay.
And all of a sudden it thinks you're like 10 feet above the ground. So then you don't have your landing gear down. So it starts flashing at you. So, the 5Gs and whatever can block those from
Okay.
working properly. Now, if you're on the ground taxiing, I don't personally think or know of any instances where that is ever. It's not going to block the radio communications with the tower. It's a complete separate frequency than what phones are using.
Yeah,
And
I always
it's
switch it on right as we're about to take off.
um, but as soon as they tell you to put on the airplane mode, I'm just going to tell you to do it. As soon as they tell you to do something, you better do it
Yeah.
because it's way better that way. It keeps everyone safe. There's a whole reason why these regulations have been put out in the first place is to, I mean, because everything is for safety related things, right? They don't go through safety briefings because they want to annoy you or they don't tell you to do certain things. They're all things that have been done in the name of safety. So, I mean, whether or not something actually does or doesn't do something, if they tell you to do it, just do it, even if it doesn't make sense. I've seen all those conspiracy videos where it's like, where uh, the reason why you put your head against the back of the chair in a bracing position if the plane were to go down is so that way you die on the crash. So that way you're not a liable thing to sue the company anymore for the fact that the airplane went down. I'm like, there are reasons why things are put out there. It's not just because.
I've never heard of that. I didn't.
Oh,
I
I've seen these videos. Whether it's on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, wherever they are, where it's like they tell you to brace. If you've seen any of like the flight movies where they crash and all their heads are right in front of the chair in front of them and they're grabbing the back or whatever, and you see all these different things like that, and people are like, well, the reason why they do it is because so that way when you crash, your head hits the back of the chair and breaks your neck and you just die or something like that. So that way you don't sue the airline or whatever. I'm like,
I never
no,
believe that kind of stuff.
no, you can't. And you see things like that, and like airlines and the FAA don't put out these safety things just to make sure that there's no litigation issues with you,
Right.
whatever. So
Um, I wanted to ask you about just like you're looking at your career and the I guess the satisfaction of being a pilot. If you were talking to somebody that was thinking about being a pilot, what would you say to them as like the joys and the best parts and what you love about being a pilot? And what would you say can be challenging about it if they were like, wanting to job shadow you or they were just seriously considering being a pilot? What are the pros and the cons?
so this would be, I guess, one of the places to bookmark is this before you ever start flight training. Go see if you can get a medical. Some people say it the other way too, which is, and I've heard this both, and I'm not condoning either side per se as much as I am telling my recommendation. I've heard people who go for like a discovery flight and they love it, and then they go through all this flight training, and then all of a sudden they realize that they have like some sort of medical condition that prevents them from getting a medical. Now you've blown all this money and you need a medical to be flying anyways. So the first thing you should do is be able to go into a medical examiner's office, which there are FAA certified doctors that you have to go to. It's not just you can go to your general practice right down the road and be like, I want an airplane medical type thing. And they're going to be like, I don't know what that is. So you have to find like an FAA certified doctor and make sure you can pass. And there are things that will necessarily disqualify you or things you might have to speak on more in length and disclose. Like you can't be colorblind and fly because lights and colors all have different meanings. Red lights and white lights go together, and if you can't see red, I don't know. I mean, you
Yeah.
just can't be colorblind. And then taxiway lights are different than runway lights, and centerline lights are different than the edge lights, and uh, whatever, all that stuff. So go see if you can get a medical first, because as soon as you get a medical, then you can sign up to get your student pilot certificate, and then you get your student pilot certificate. Then that's the best legal and safe course of action to make sure that you can actually do this. Because I know there are a lot of people who do some things backwards and not necessarily the way the FAA wants you to do, and do it as much as the FAA tells you to do it. So that's the first thing is go see if you can even medically qualify. Because even if you have bad vision, but you wear corrective lenses, you're fine. I can't tell you every single one of them that is on there that's but if you had a heart attack you can't have medical, but there's ways around it. There's so detailed things, and you have to get all these exemptions if you have certain conditions, and it's doable. So I'm not saying for a heart attack, I'm not trying to quote anything per se, but not everyone has a perfect medical record. I sure didn't, but nothing was bad enough to disqualify me. It was just like, hey, tell me why you went to your gastroenterologist. So I was having heartburn. Oh, okay. Whatever. It's
Sure. Yeah.
things like that where you have to disclose all these medical things, and then they may ask you. And then if you nothing changes over those next couple of years before you have to go get another medical or something, then you're fine. So that's the first thing. Know like whether or not you actually want to do it. Don't spend all this money. It's not cheap to get your ratings.
It's not like it's a
No.
big process.
Oh yeah. Initially, depending on the flight school, and there are different ways, right? And not all the certifications are required to get to the airlines. Like you don't need to get all your instructor ratings. I do recommend that, even though there are probably a lot of people that say, no, you don't need to do that. It makes you look a lot better knowing that you could teach people. But you essentially you get your private, which is most of the time at all the flight schools you get a private single engine airplane rating. So you start on the Cessna, then you get your instrument rating. So then you're still a private pilot, but now you have an instrument rating, so you can essentially fly in the clouds and fly instrument flight plans, which is what all the airlines fly anyway. So you definitely need that. Then you have to get your multi-engine or commercial single engine, depending on how the program's laid out. You definitely need your commercial. You need your commercial single to be a CFI, which is your certified flight instructor for single engine. And then if you want your multi-engine rating, obviously if you want to fly the big twin engine jets, you need a multi-engine rating. So there's 4 right there: private, instrument, commercial single, commercial multi, and you don't need a private multi before you get your commercial multi. And then you go into your CFIs. You get your normal CFI. You get your CFII, which is your certified flight instructor instrument, and you get your MEI, which is your multi-engine instructor. Now, not everyone gets their MEI, and some people don't get their CFIIs. They just get their CFI or CFIIs, and they don't get all 3 of them. I'm not saying you need all of them, but a lot of the flight schools that are pumping out pilots want you to get them all anyways. So that way, if there are more opportunities and you can get more flight hours, and do it that way. It's not an easy process, and it's not going to be a walk in the park where you just show up and you fly. Now you have days where you can do that, where it's like, oh, today's a fly day. Generally, most of the time, you need to be studying most days because there's so much. And, when you're a private pilot and you don't have the knowledge that, an experienced pilot has, it's going to be drinking through a fire hose, especially when you don't have someone in the family who's already doing that. It's going to be so new you don't even understand it. It's speaking a different language. And knowing all the little ins and outs just to get into the airplane to fly for the first time. It's not easy. It's not going to be a walk in the park. It's a lot of fun, though. I mean, you get to fly an airplane. No one gets to do that, but obviously
Right.
a select amount of group. Or a select group of people. There you go. But once you do it and you get through it all, it's going to take you, roughly about a year to get all the ratings if you go through like the fast track programs that are pretty quick. And as long as you study and you keep up with it, you can't really work another job with it. You got to dedicate yourself. Now you can go to the mom and pops and just get a private license and just like, I want my own little plane and I just want to fly my family around. You can just go get a private and that's not a big deal. And then you can take as much time as you want because that's not your career. But if you're going to go through the career process, the faster you get it done, the better. Because at some point, you go from spending all this money to making all this money. And so the faster you can reverse that and pay all that money back from your loan that you took out for flight school, which is roughly between $90,000 and $100,000 to get through all your ratings. I mean, it's gonna quickly go back to paying off that loan and then making a lot of money. But the longer you wait to do that, then the harder it's going to be and a lot more money you have to spend.
You said you had a bachelor's. Is that like a true 4-year degree, or is that like you
Oh,
said
yeah.
it can be done in a year? Or how does?
Well, so yeah, so many different ins and outs. The bachelor's degree that's associated with flying is under Part 141, which is just a set of regulations that schools have to get all these different certifications and whatnot to be able to instruct under that. And it's just more detailed and regimented to get through all these things. But you can just go through and do Part 61, which is you don't have a degree associated with it, essentially. I'm not going to condone doing 141 or not 141. It's all the same. It all gets you to the same place. The only difference with the advantage of getting your degree with it is, number one, you can start really young. And the restricted ATP, so you get the whole reason why you get all these ratings is to essentially build your time up to get to your airline transport pilot certificate. So your ATPs are 1,500 hours of total time amongst all these other hours, where you need 50 hours of whatever this and 100 hours of this. And so all these different, breakdowns of your times that you have to get, but 1,500 hours of total flight time. So the more you instruct, obviously the more hours, or if you go get all these different little jobs like pipeline surveying or who knows, firefighting, whatever. There's all these different things. Flying for a charter airline, like I was, air carrier. Keep catching myself on that, but the the pathway to 1500 is with a ATP or to get an ATP. But with the 141 degree associated with it, there's two different types. Obviously, you can get a bachelor's or associate's degree. So if you get your bachelor's and you complete the program to the standards and whatever, you can go to the airlines with a restricted ATP, which, obviously there's restrictions on it, but you can start flying at the regionals, essentially at 1,000 hours, which is 1,500 hours, which is 6 to 9 months of flying. You're saving yourself as like an instructor or whatever, building your time. And then your
Okay.
associates, I believe it's 1,250. So there's an advantage of that. But mind you, you're in schooling for 3 to 4 years. I did it, like I said, in 3, and I knew other guys who did it in 3, but the other guys took the entire 4 years because they didn't have any credits coming into high school or from high school into college. And the disadvantage to that, though, going 141 is if you're older. I mean, if you're already past, college and whatnot, you already have a degree. You don't need an aviation degree to go to the airlines.
Okay.
Don't go back to school. I mean, most airlines don't even require a degree now. It just looks good.
I know. Okay, so I know a girl who's a flight attendant, and she was telling me about the struggles of being a flight attendant, and she was telling me about the perks that she loves, and she loves the job. But I think that she felt, I don't want to speak for her, but almost like there was a ceiling for her that she wanted to kind of like do something more. And so I was like, well, are you interested in being a pilot? And she said, maybe. But is there any, like, does the fact that she's flown around and been on planes and she's a flight attendant, does any of that help someone like that become a pilot? Or is it like there would be like me just starting from the beginning because none of their experience really matters?
All experience matters. I mean, the more you know, the better. But it's not like flight attendant knowledge translates a lot into flying knowledge. Now, you may know now more of what flight attendants have to go through, and you know the ins and outs of their procedures, and that makes it a lot simpler to understand if you transition into the pilot world and you eventually go back to the same airline you're working at. Because I've seen that lots of times where flight attendants are like, I just want to be that person up front versus serving people and making sure they're safe back here. Like, I want to take that next step over that way, and then whatnot. It's still, again, drinking out of a fire hose and finding out all these nuances you've never heard of before because so much of it's so detailed and they don't need to know any of it. But at least when something happens or there's situations that might arise with a passenger or flight attendants in general, they have that knowledge of, hey, I can know how to handle this better than probably a lot of the other pilots.
No,
But
that's a
beyond
good
that,
point.
it's just starting something new.
Yeah,
You
because
know,
they're not going to have the education on um, all the things a pilot goes through. Like
yeah.
they're totally different training, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, and so with a lot of them, a lot of these people who generally come to the airlines are not younger. A lot of them are sometimes in their late 20s, early 30s, and found out whatever career field they were in, went to school to go to business, and came out, worked in a bank for whatever amount of years, and they're like, "Gosh, this is really boring. I don't like sitting behind a desk all day." And then turns
Yeah.
around and they like become a pilot. Don't go back and get a degree. That's a waste of money. You already have a degree. Go through and do the Part 61 route, because Part 61 will at least give you you know all your ratings still. It's just you got to get a little bit more time behind the airplane before you can move on to the airlines. Again, only 500 hours, but go through it, that process. I say it's not that big of a deal. It's a lot harder than that, but between determining the two. But with the restricted ATP to go to the airlines at less time, that also allows you to start at 21 versus 23, which 23 is the basic age for anyone to go to the airlines.
Okay.
Now you can start flying as young as you want. You can't start soloing until I think you're 16, and can't get your private rating until you're 17, and things like that. But
Wow. You can
yeah,
really that's awesome. I mean, you can get a head start on this.
oh yeah. But I mean, you can't do anything beyond flight instruction, after getting your commercial rating and whatnot until you turn 21 or 23, depending on what rating process you went through. Which at that point, I mean, all those kids who've been doing it for so long, they have all these hours now, more than what they need by the time they hit the age they get to go in. So it all evens out at the end.
Have you ever had, like, obviously you're young, relatively speaking. Have you ever had a passenger let you know, like, they were nervous because they saw you and they felt like you were young? And probably doesn't happen today, but maybe when you were first
No, it
starting?
happens. It happens a lot. There's me and one of my other good friends who I fly with, and we both, when we shave, have baby faces. And
Sure.
there was one time where some lady walks by, oh, you guys are, holy, what? Did you guys just fly us? You guys look like you're 12. And it's like, we're 14 actually, but, and it's like, wait, what? And it's like, no, we're not. But, oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's a stigma with if there's not an old pilot with a mustache, who looks like he
Yes.
was some Air Force veteran, then, you're not going to have a good flight. Now, there's some political stuff I could probably get into about how the future of hiring looks. And at the end of the day, it's all about safety. That's all it is. There's nothing else important beyond safety. Safety is the strength of the industry. Nothing else weighs as much. There might be other factors into how people hire, but safety is number one. So if they don't have a good safety record, no matter who they are, you shouldn't be hiring them. So most of the time, if you walk in and you're on a Southwest or American flight, you're probably in great hands.
I would say for me personally, I have never even really given it any thought. I believe that there's so much training and so many hours that a pilot has to have that um, I can genuinely say I've never looked at a pilot and thought anything about it. And I've had some landings that were like not great, and I've had some that I was like didn't even notice that we landed, and it was like incredible. But even when the landing isn't great, I'm like, no, it is what it is. Like it's probably has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the pilot, I don't know.
When we've
But
had, I had one passenger and he was claustrophobic,
okay.
and we ended up having to turn back to the gate. Um, and because Vegas is a mess a lot of the time, and because of what we call flow times and edicts and just different types of times that they give us when we can take off to go to the airport. So we have to be taking off with them at a certain window of like 2 to 3 minutes or whatever. So we have to be at the runway ready to go by that time. There's some times where it's so backed up, and this can go to any airport, especially if bad weather happens and everything slows down, that those times can get extended. So we're not going to sit there if it's like an hour plus with the engines burning all this fuel and wasting all this money for the company at the end of the runway for an hour plus. And so we got something similar to that, where Vegas ended up putting in these massive flow times, and we had to turn around and go back to the gate. And this dude just got really like scared and claustrophobic, and I was able to help calm him down a bit, and get him back to figuring out how we can work out, how we can make him feel safe. Well, that never happens. Most of the time, no one ever says anything, and I've heard of stories too on other flights where people are scared of the flying because they just don't do it that much. But yeah, most of the time you just walk in, you sit down, you get to your place, you show up to wherever you're going, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, and before I traveled for work, I would travel maybe once a year for a vacation. And I did get this like almost out of body experience. Like it was exciting to be walking down that thing where you step onto the plane and finding your seat, and takeoff and landing was like, exciting. And then you get into
Yeah.
reading a book or whatever. And I've lost some of that, which is a bummer, but I can see people, it's like a memorable experience for
Oh
if you
yeah.
don't fly a lot.
And I mean, our whole job beyond taking people safely from one point to another is making sure they enjoy the flight. Like it's not just. I mean, like we want to have good landings. We want to make sure that if there's turbulence coming up, maybe there's a better altitude that has less turbulence. It's like we don't just, oh, this sucks. Well, too bad to be them. Like we look for alternate options to make it as comfortable for everyone, so that way everyone has a great experience. So I mean, because we're not afraid of turbulence. If bad turbulence happens, okay, whatever, we just move on, and it's just annoying. It's not like turbulence is gonna take down an airplane.
That's good
It's
to hear.
just yeah. Bad turbulence is not something like that to be worried about, unless if it's like severe turbulence and you're not wearing your seatbelt. Then I would be worried because then you come out of your seat, like the Hawaiian flight. Wear your seatbelt.
Does it
So
What about like when you're in some northern place in the winter and I get on the plane and they're like, we have to defrost it. And like they're literally, you can see ice on the engine and they're like out there trying to warm that up. It seems a little sketch to me.
de-icing is a very rigorous process, and depending on how bad it is, uh, ice can take down airplanes, and it has. Um, the one that just happened in Brazil, I heard from something that it was icing related that got the plane to stall, and stalling is just you exceeding the critical angle of attack and you're losing your lift. I mean, basic terms. Um, so ice deteriorates lift a lot. So it's a very, like I said, rigorous process to try and identify where the ice is on the airplane or the frost or whatever, and make sure that if it's if it froze overnight, but it's a clear in a million outside, and by clear in a million I mean like it's a million miles of visibility. There's not a cloud in sight, but it's still, let's say, below freezing. Like you're probably still going to have ice on the wings. So you only need to just get rid of the ice versus putting on like a preventative liquid after getting rid of the ice to keep it off for as long as you can until your anti-ice systems kick in and whatnot while you're flying. So I mean, yeah, it takes usually an extra, who knows, 25 to 30 minutes in my experience of doing it to go from the process of starting up, getting over to the anti or de-icing pad, and getting all the ice off, and making sure that our pre-contamination checks are good and that we're safe to fly.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll try to bring this one to a close. The last thing I was kind of curious about was just like reflection and advice. So we kind of talked about that a little bit, but how does being a pilot affect your life outside of work, like with personal relationships? Has it affected it? I mean, with you staying at home every night, maybe not, but I'm just curious, like, how does being a pilot affect your identity and your day to day life?
Well, it depends. There are all these jokes out there that you'll know that someone's a pilot because he'll tell you right away.
Oh, I did not know that. That's funny.
Yeah,
That's
there
pretty.
are jokes like that out there. Where I think I've heard that about like vegans and stuff. Where it's like, how do you know someone's vegan? They'll tell you. It's the same thing with pilots, where pilots think they're these glorious gifts to mankind, and they are out there. I will tell you, like I love flying, and I love talking about it, and it's so much fun to me to be able to do that. And it's like a challenge every single time to get a great landing and make sure a flight goes well, even if it's very repetitive from the day before. Like it's always something new every day. But the pilot world sometimes gets a bad rap, because pilots make all this money and they're always selfish, and they'll let you know that they have it. I don't know. It's just not being that kind of person, I guess. But yeah, it's being a pilot is fun. It's not something you find. It's you can find anyone who's in finance or business. It feels like whatever, right? You name it. And then finding a
Oh
pilot, it's
yeah.
like, oh, that's different experiences. You know a lot of things that most people don't, because the general mindsets with flying is you go from here to here and that's it. I mean, like it's not that simple. It's did you know that you can't land with a tailwind? No one knows those types of things, and how lift works, and you're not just flying in a metal tube through the sky hoping that it picks up. Like there are a lot of things, and how engines work. Type, it's like I'm not a car guy. I never have been, but now like I can understand the basics of a car, engine because I understood the basics of of a propeller plane. It's similar mindsets like that. So I'm like, there are a lot of translations over. The sad part was, in my experience of working at Lululemon and being a pilot, is more people cared about your Lululemon discount than they did about you flying, which was really funny
What
because
do you
I was doing both at the same time for a while when I was like flight instructing, and I my college job was working there, and um, I almost hit 5 years. I think it was a month short of 5 years with Lululemon, and I would go from because I work out my schedule because it's so hot here. You'd fly so early in the morning, and then I'd work in the afternoon at Lulu, and I was just working 2 jobs, and I worked out fine. And I'd go from like there to like a coffee shop to get some more caffeine in me, and I'd be in my flight uniform, and they'd be like, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm a pilot." "Well, that's pretty cool." "Are you off work now?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm going to my other job." "Oh, where do you work?" "Oh, Lululemon." "Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, I want all these. I have these leggings, and it's just a lot more relatable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I always found that so funny because then I went to I was so used to it at that point. I went to this good friend of mine's opening house, and her husband, just bought this property and whatever out way east Arizona or Phoenix, and I was telling them that story, and then another girl shows up later, who was her friend or whatnot, and she was like, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm like, "Well, I'm a pilot." And then someone's like, I work at Lululemon. She goes, "Oh my gosh!" And then like everyone starts laughing because she could care less about the pilot part. It was just one of those things where that became more of my day to day identity. Where it's like, "Oh, you're the one who works there." I'm like, "Yes, yes, I am." Like I also fly airplanes. "Oh, okay, cool," but like, hey, like, what's your discount like? I'm like, I can't tell you.
I
So
just I don't get that. I mean, being I've always thought it
Scottsdale's a
was
different
super cool
beast.
that you were a pilot. Yeah.
Uh,
I do like Lululemon. I mean, I do. But at the same time, like, I don't think I'm getting your discount. I think it's great that
no,
you get a discount, but like, I don't know. I'd much rather ask you about what it's like being a pilot, you know?
definitely two types of people out there. I I've had a lot more of the other ones, but I mean day to day wise, it's cool because I feel like my schedule's so different.
Yeah.
Like I can wake up and go golfing on a Tuesday when it's not busy, where everyone else is at work,
Hmm.
or sometimes that bites you, and you got to work over the weekend as opposed to being able to go out with friends to dinner, whatever, because that's the only time they're off. So it has its ups and downs, but with more seniority, you can maybe just only bid Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, and you only fly those days, and then the rest of the time you're off. So there are things like that that can help you, you know, switch around what you're doing. But beyond that, I mean, everyone knows I fly, and I think the only person who really gets nervous when I fly is my mother.
Sure. Yeah.
Just it's like, well, what happens if he dies? And it's like, I'm not gonna die. So uh, I have nothing on my car that says I'm a pilot. I think that's tacky sometimes. But I do have my license plate does talk about me working at Lulu, so um, it's been like that for a while. But I mean, beyond it, I love what I do. I just bought my first house at 26.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I mean, I don't know many other friends at my age who were able to do it outside of being a pilot. So it really does provide a great life and career, and I'm living very comfortably, and I can pretty much be able to do more things than not that I want to. Now that doesn't mean I have unlimited money and I can just pick up whatever flying I want, because that is sadly not the case. But right now, at least because it's we're off peak season, no one's traveling for summer anymore. Everyone's going back to school,
Okay.
uh, things like that. So it has given me a lot of things that I feel like a lot of other jobs, it would take you a long time before you can get up to that point. Because I mean,
Yes.
starting salaries now at most of the regional airlines start around 100 grand
Okay.
for your first year at the most basic level.
Which is amazing. I mean, I don't, and I always assumed every pilot did the whole like sleeping at other cities thing. So I thought you did that. I didn't know you was at home every night. So um, that's huge. Like the fact that you get to be at home interact with your family and friends. I'm sure some friends just assume you're a pilot, so they're like, okay, he's gone a lot. But if they really know you, then they would know that that's not the case, and then they can just kind of text you and call you, and
That
you
doesn't
know,
mean I'm not working, and sometimes that means I work, into the evening, so that way, I wake up and I'll go to the gym or something, and then I'll work in the late morning, early afternoon, and go to um, the airport until 7 to 9 p.m. whatever. Especially if you get delayed and you're there later, it's not like I have all this free time on the days I work. Still like any other job, you have your 9 to 5 mentality where you're there, and then once you get off at 5 p.m., you don't really want to do much anyways.
no, I'm sure it's exhausting. So you're probably just chilling at home for a little bit.
Oh yeah, your brain is constantly working on seeing all these different scenarios and how they play out. What am I going to do if this happens? And I'm not saying anything about like being worried that emergencies are going to pop up, but just knowing how to respond. And it's like, oh well, okay, the weather is this at this place, so that means that I have to be at this altitude at this point before I can, you know, decide whether or not I can land. And there's all these minute little details like that you're constantly having to remember and know. It's not like you can just go to school, uh, dump all this knowledge, and then I'm going to learn more in the job. I mean, there's elements of that are very true, that you're going to learn a lot more in the job than you will on the ground, like any other thing. But there are a lot of
Yeah.
basic uh, concepts and principles that you have to stay up to date with all the time, and you have to constantly keep up with the regulations and all the things that go into making sure that you do everything legally by the book, so that way everyone gets there safely. I mean, it's not like a walk in the park, and we got to go to recurrent schooling every year. Depending on the airline and its process. For us, if you're a captain, you got to go every 6 months. You have to go back in the simulator and demonstrate all these, emergency procedures, and make
I,
sure you're still up to date with the plane's systems and things like that. And so you get like an oral portion, and then you get the flight portion, which is consistent throughout the rest of my career, and it has been since I started. When you're going through all your schooling part, like you're getting all your ratings before you get to the airlines, you're going through. You have to do a written test before we call them check rides or your flight test, and then once you do your written test, and you go into your check ride, and you have to do an oral portion and then your flight portion, and you have to know all these things, demonstrate them to standards, and then go into the plane and do the same thing in standards of the airplane. It's not just like, go up and show me you can turn the airplane around in a 360-degree circle.
well, I love hearing that. It makes me feel like, okay, all the pilots are um, required to do continuing education basically every 6 months. It's kind of nice because that's
Yeah.
like your life is in their hands, even though you do. Everyone knows that it's like you're less likely to get in an accident on a plane, and that for them, basically, it's relatively safe. Like I don't get stressed at all, but it's still reassuring to know that pilots like have to stay up to date on that stuff. A lot of industries have continuing education, but you can sort of just like kind of mail it in. Like you don't really have to put that much energy. You're just kind of skipping the modules, and it doesn't. I feel like the aviation industry takes that stuff seriously. And I've heard you say a few times that safety is the most important thing, and I like hearing that. So
Full. I mean, just think of it the same way that you know the I'm trying. I have like two different thought processes right now. Number one, like pilots want to get there as much as you want to get there.
yeah, I like that. That's a good way to
Everyone,
say it.
everyone always like thinks it's like, like I have to be here too, and it's like you don't think that we want to make it there. Like we want to make sure you stay in the airport and you can't make it to wherever you're going. Like when there are delays and things. Also, we don't like being delayed because that means our day is that much longer and more complicated. And
You get
that can
paid more, like because you're working longer.
we're paid daily. I mean, there are
So
little
not really.
incentives.
You're yeah.
So they're the bigger airlines and a lot of the other places pay hourly. That's like the most common thing you'll see. And again, that's not just like you show up at the airport at 9 a.m. and you punch in and, you start making it's like from the time you essentially take off to the time you land is when you're being paid.
Okay.
So it's flight hours. So it's a little bit different. So
Oh, so you're
we're
not
paid.
getting paid if it's delayed in that scenario.
I don't want to speak for other airlines. There might be delay incentives, but as soon as, block times get longer and whatnot, I think there are things that make your pay go up.
Sure. I mean,
I'm sure there are those things. I
I
just
think
know
that
for
that's
us,
fair. Like that's your time.
yeah. And I'm like I said, I think there are those things in process. And there are different processes at different airlines. Each airline has its own little thing of how they go about things. For us, if we work over 10 hours, we get like an extra $50, and then if it's over like 11 or 12, we get another $50. So if we extend our day out beyond our normal working times closer to the maximum amount, we can work legally throughout a day, and we get a little bit more on top of it. But beyond that, if I work, you know, 4 hours or if I work 9 hours, I'm still getting paid the same amount for us daily. So, you know, I want to make more money in a less amount of time, like anyone else does.
Yeah.
And as soon as we're delayed, that frustrates us because we don't like being delayed either. We want to finish our day as much as you do.
Yeah.
Like it's still work, and I want to go home. And even though our work is fun and we get to enjoy it, I still want to go home and eat and do all those things because we can't necessarily do all those after one leg per se. Sometimes it's quick turns and you got to be in, out, ready to go. So there's a lot of misconceptions with that as well. I feel like I've seen.
I
It's
mean,
like,
you're
oh, what am I
trying to
gonna
make it to Lululemon before they close.
exactly? That's what everyone's flying to Scottsdale for. Yeah, the store I used to work at here. Whenever time I was there a couple of years ago was the number 2 grossing store in the company.
Damn. That
Yeah, in
makes sense.
Scottsdale. Yeah,
Yeah, it does
Scottsdale's a
make
big
sense.
Lululemon destination.
Well, it's beautiful weather all the time. It's I could just see the lifestyle there kind of caters to people that like to be fit and take care of themselves, which is usually go to like an athleisure place like that. So I
Oh
get
yeah.
it.
Well, um, yeah. Biggest takeaway though, we love flying. We make good money. It's not that much of a job. It can have its moments of getting more complex and dealing with a lot more situations that we may not want to, but we want to get there as much as anyone else does.
I
Because
love that.
if we're late, you're late. Yeah, like no one wants to be late. That's less time in the hotel room sleeping, or now I don't have as much time to get food before I go to bed. There are things like that. If we're overnighting somewhere, or if I get back later from whatever trip, and now it's 8 p.m. opposed to 6 p.m. I'm not going to go to the gym most likely, especially if I got to fly again tomorrow because it's late and I'm probably tired because I worked an extra 2 hours more than I wanted to.
Yep.
So there are things that it affects us just as much as anyone else, and I don't like being gone more than I have to be. But
No, I do not blame you. And that makes complete sense. I don't either. So, and
yeah,
I always have to tell my wife, like, I always keep her updated, flight status or whatever, and I send her screenshots, want her to know when I get home. So, I don't think anybody likes it, but I never get mad about it. I mean, there's always a reason, and I don't need to know the reason. I just want to get there safely.
yeah, and most of the time, it's a big majority of people who are like, this happens. It's part of the
Yeah.
nature of the beast. Now, where you can start finding the rowdy peoples, when the flight gets canceled and then there's no solution and it's late and there's no one there to help you, I can definitely understand the frustration with things like that. And there have been
Yeah.
a lot
Or
of
people are flying. I mean, I'm flying for work a lot and life goes on. But if you're like flying to see some birthday or some funeral or something that's like, it's either you're there or you miss it. Like that
yeah.
could be frustrating for sure.
Oh yeah, and we definitely get that, and we want to do everything we can to make sure people don't miss it and miss those major events. Um, but again, everyone always looks at us like it's our fault that the weather sucks. And
Right.
it's like why can't you land? It's like, well, there's no visibility. Well, so I'm like, you're right. Why I should go break all these regulations for you? So There's
Yep.
always that one person who gives us a hard time. You know, the other thing too that pilots get is, you know, like they see you walking through an airport and it's like, hey, where's my gate at? It's like, where are you going?
Oh man.
I'm going to, you know, Omaha. I have no idea where that is. I'm like, well, did you look at the screen? Well, aren't you a pilot? It's not like I know where all the flights are. There are
um.
thousands of flights that happen
So
out of Phoenix. You know, I'm like, I don't know through those thousands of flights, you know, within a month, which gate, because gates and planes constantly change. And
yeah, I mean, there's no way you would know.
no,
That's so
and
silly.
so people, you know, it's like, oh, we're, you know, the easy stuff, you know, if it's your home airport, hey, where's the baggage claim? Oh, go that way, you know, fine. It's like, hey, where do I pick up my car at? I don't know.
Pilots do
That's,
have an aura about them. I see them in the airport all the time. You've always got like the sweetest luggage that it's like a secret luggage only for
oh,
pilots or
with the
something.
hook on it.
Yes, they have the cool hook and they're black. And pilots usually are like wearing black with the hat. And I'm always like, oh, that's a pilot. Like, I love it. You know, I love when I see a pilot.
And as
Um,
we were talking about
but
earlier, those types of pilots who like being recognized the way you say, "Oh, I love seeing them like that." They love feeling like they get those looks. So it's like, "Yeah, I am a pilot. I walk through and I get the recognition I deserve." And it's like, "Yeah, okay." You know,
yeah,
I wear a hat and a double-breasted plated jacket.
yep,
Cool. You're
yep.
awesome. Good for you, man. Enjoy your time in Atlanta. People will know where I'm referring to with that
Really?
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Delta takes a lot of um, jokes from a lot of people because they think they're essentially better than most everyone. Now, there are a lot of great guys at Delta, and I don't mean it against anyone, but you know, there's been so much of these like, I don't know, cocky guys who flew at Delta and I think they're better than everyone. And it's like, no, you're just as much of a pilot as anyone else, and your airline does not denote, you know, you being better than me type thing. So um, it's one of those things. That's like one of the companies that people poke fun at, but yeah, you know, you see like the uniforms getting a little bit more lax though with the,
Yeah.
you know, like most airlines don't even require you to wear a hat anymore. I think Delta still does. Most of them, you don't even need a jacket, things like that. But you still have certain standards, like you have to shave and you got to keep a clean cut and a good look about yourself.
Are there
So,
like I'm sorry, I do want to let you go, but
oh no, no, I'm I'm here on your time.
well, when you're talking about Delta for a second there, are there like airline stereotypes that are true, or are they usually just it's not actually like is like you're saying Delta people poke fun at that airline? Like I had no idea. Is there like a
Yeah, I mean,
pilot
within any,
community?
yeah, within any industry, I feel like, you know, there's certain like, oh, you know, like the accountants will always have jokes. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but for a lot of the guys who I know, we have jokes about Delta. Like Delta stands for doesn't ever leave the airport. You know,
I like
things
that.
like that, or you know, like Frontier will maybe get jokes, or Spirit gets jokes because you know they fly the, you know, the small seats, and I'm gonna be so uncomfortable if I fly Spirit. Don't ever put me on Spirit. And, you know, if you breathe, you have to pay an extra fee on these airlines. Things like that. I mean, people like their airlines. I know a lot of people who love flying on Delta, and Delta gives a great passenger experience, and I have nothing against them.
American
Um,
is Phoenix, right?
yes, they have a Phoenix base, um, but I think their headquarters are out of DFW and so Dallas.
What
Um,
is the Alaska state like? What is the word or on the street about Alaska Airlines? Because that's Seattle. That's what I fly on.
uh, Pretty much Alaska is one of the better airlines. I mean, I've
Oh,
always
yes.
enjoyed flying
Okay.
on on Alaska, and every pilot that I've ever met at Alaska has been super awesome, and they're so nice and respectful. And um, I mean, I've never had a bad experience on Alaska. Well, you know, the first time I never flew them. I mean, they're not based out of Phoenix, so you know, you get a lot more deals and routes. Um, Through like Southwest America. But Alaska has obviously Seattle and Portland on lock, and so a lot more flights going up there. And I had to go pick up an airplane out of Washington, and Um, the flight they booked me on was Alaska. It was my first time ever flying on it, and the Alaska guy, or I'm sorry, the Alaska captain came up to me, and I was standing up there, and he introduced himself. And there's this thing where if a pilot's on another airline, they're supposed to go up to the cockpit and ask for a ride type stuff and introduce themselves, and just it's like a courteous thing to be doing. This flight attendant, he was giving me all these like extra snacks and drinks, and they were taking really good care of me, and I have nothing but nice things to say about Alaska, and I'd be happy if I ever got a job at Alaska to fly for them. So
Okay.
I don't know many stereotypes of them, in quite honesty, which is probably usually better for the airlines. So, I, it's one of those things. Like Southwest has this thing with the airline world where they taxi really fast because they don't start getting paid until they take off, so they want to get off the ground as fast as possible.
Okay, that makes sense.
So,
I like that.
again, that may not be true anymore, but as far as I know, they're taxing fast all the time. So, which I've personally experienced because we were trying to race one of the. I shouldn't say race. That's not the word. We were trying to beat them to the end of the runway, doing it within legal things. Nothing was
Sure, yeah.
broken. Yeah, right. But we were trying to beat them to the end of the runway so we could take off first. And then we both called tower like, "Hey, we'll be ready first." So there are things like that,
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, they exist. I probably won't be able to think of them all the time. Delta gets the most slack from most of the people I know. Southwest
Is
gets a
that
little
because
slack.
Delta like holds themselves in high regard, and so they kind of like let's make fun of them for that, or why is
Yeah,
that?
I we I had an experience at college when I was in flight school, and there, my degree was programs for aviation. So, mind you, if the aviation world falls apart tomorrow, my degree means nothing. So, it's also not a bad idea to have a degree in something else and understand more, because my two things that I have knowledge on are airplanes and retail. So, it's not like I can just go turn around and use my degree in a bank per se. Um, but Delta introduced this pipeline program for pilots to go through the run of the regionals, and that's kind of where the industry's going. And the the guy who's one of our top professors within the aviation college got this email from them saying that they want the president of the university there. They want these certain types of microphones, these certain types of speakers. They expect it to be in the basketball arena, and they want all these types of things to be in there, and this is what they expect, and this is who they're bringing, and they're bringing the chief pilots and all these full uniform and things like that. And it's like, yeah, you're gonna be in like a classroom with like 50 kids, and they're like, how dare you? And he's telling us all this in class and whatnot, but it's like, and then they show up, and the first thing the head guy says to us in the class is, here at Delta Airlines, and we don't just say Delta because that disrespects our brand. And I was like, yeah, okay. It was kind of a turnoff to me because I've
Okay.
never had that with any other airline. So that was, I mean, they're a great airline. I'd be happy to fly for them. So I have nothing against them, but yeah, they get that rap because they hold themselves in higher regards, which they have a good reason to. They have a great
Yeah.
reputation.
Um, I just remember one time I was like on a flight overseas, and it was on one airline that I don't remember, but they were like, we're not going to be able to get you there until tomorrow, and I was like, I like hadn't only flown like 3 times in my life, and it was
Yeah,
to go to Europe, and I was like, well, I mean, I'm missing out on a whole day, like that stinks.
yeah,
Is there anything else you can do? And a Delta, like my wife and I got to get on Delta, but our flight wasn't through Delta, so we didn't pay them unless there was some type of swap. I don't know, like they rearranged it behind the scenes, and we still got there. We just like connected through a different city, and we flew via Delta, and I was
was
very
it
thankful.
Atlanta or Detroit?
Detroit. Yep. Yeah, when we were supposed to be going through Chicago, so we switched cities and airlines.
So you were either
Um,
on or on United or American.
okay, I don't know. I mean, this was 2016 or something like that,
Yeah,
but it was still like I just remember thinking, thank God, like that was sweet. We still got there the same day. Now at this point, that's one of those like moments in my life where it really was for a vacation that we saved for like 6 months to go to Europe. Like we
Yeah.
were bartending, and the flight was probably $1,300 in 2016, and we'd probably saved like money for the Airbnbs over there. So I didn't want to miss that day. It wouldn't have been the end of the world, but I was very grateful, and so that kind of stuck with me. Um, but
Oh,
I
they're a
don't
great airline.
know.
Their passenger experience on Delta is incredible.
Okay, yeah, and I like that. Like you're saying, the passenger experience is good, but and the pilot community, it's like we give them a hard time because they think
Oh yeah.
they're so great or
Well,
whatever.
a good friend of mine who I golf with is a Delta pilot, and I mean, the pilot corps is great. I mean, they're all good dudes that I know over there.
Yeah,
It's just the same reason why pilots get all the jokes about it's like, oh, you're a pilot because you told me. Because it's the same thing. I
yeah.
mean, there's nothing to scoff at. If they give you a job offer, you better take it because that'd be crazy to turn them down.
Okay. Well, I guess pilots will keep getting the awe from me because I think it is super cool. So you know,
It's fun. A lot to do and a lot to know, but I mean, it all pays off at the end, especially when you get all these days off and you get to enjoy your life probably more than what seems like a lot of other people who do. We have to work a lot harder, at a 9 to 5 and not be as
sure,
home as much. But do what you love and don't care about the money. But mine just happens to have money involved.
right.
Yeah,
AJ, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been, I think, more than I asked you to do. So I appreciate you doing that.
oh,
And
of
I
course.
genuinely, if you ever want to come back and talk more, I would love to have you do that. So please don't hesitate to reach out in the future. Um, yeah, and I sincerely just appreciate you coming on. It's been
Yeah, of course.
fantastic.
I'm
Um,
glad I could help show stuff. I guess.
oh yeah, no, I mean, I'm I appreciate it, and it's been fascinating to learn like what it was like getting a license and just talking through it. So again, thank you.
Lots of
Um,
studying. Lots of stuff.
all right,
Schooling
I'm gonna
never ends.
bring no. I'm gonna bring this one to a close. Just remember to not exit out of anything.